we do courses, right? But our courses aren't like, oh, you're gonna make $100,000. It's the basics. We want to teach the basics, and we have put such a big emphasis on.
Noah is an Amazon seller. He's worked in several different roles within Amazon, but created his own brands and done amazing things with the brands that he started up on Amazon.
Myself personally, I have typically historically that I'll talk about, right, that are what I would consider like my success stories. But I have had that have just blown up and failed.
What do you think is the number one lesson that you learned from those failures?
That was probably the number one lesson. Don't just sell a product because you think it's good and just because you think it's going to make you money, because you're going to have a really, really hard time.
Welcome along to the next episode of the Seller's Journey podcast this week. I'm joined by Noah Wickham. Noah is an Amazon seller. He's worked in several different roles within Amazon, but most importantly, he's created his own brands and done amazing things with the brands that he started up on Amazon. And hopefully we're going to hear a little bit more about those on today's podcast. So Noah, welcome along, mate. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I guess just to kind of give a bit of a kick-off, do you just want to give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, just talking about specifically what you've done on Amazon and kind of, what you've achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the e-commerce space for over a decade at this point in time. I started just doing resale on eBay, funny enough. Wow. I have done drop shipping. I have had my own, white label brands and private label brands, multiple of them. I've exited a couple of brands. I've had my own consultancy before as well. I've worked with about 600 different brands personally at this point in time. And now I am the VP of Sales and Marketing here at My Amazon Guy, where we currently work with 400 different brands. So I'm pretty versatile. I look at myself as kind of a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to e-commerce and Amazon. And, however, I tend to still see that I'm a little bit more experienced than the average guy. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't look old enough to have a decade's worth of experience now. I like to say that as a compliment, by the way. Sounds like a similar kind of background to me. Obviously, I look a bit older than you, so it's no major surprises. But, amazing. Like, I'm really looking forward to kind of getting into this conversation and talking to you about the different things that you've done. Particularly, really interested in your kind of own Amazon journey, if you like, the brands that you've created. I think you mentioned private label and white label. It's probably one of the questions that I get asked about the most is, what should I be looking out for? What kind of products should I sell on Amazon? How do people do it? And I guess for me, it's become a lot more difficult to start an Amazon brand than it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago, just because the platform's become more saturated. It's, you didn't necessarily have every single brand going that would sell on Amazon back then. So, you had a lot more opportunity to sell, but that definitely doesn't mean that, people shouldn't do it and people shouldn't try it if they've got a great idea and a product that's got, a particular niche or a particular USP. Then I always feel like it's still a kind of vibrant market and one that people should take advantage of because, the entry requirements are still relatively straightforward and Amazon make it really easy for you with the kind of FBA models and things like that they do. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of talking a little bit more about that. Can you just tell me a little bit more about how you came to the idea of selling on Amazon before you actually kind of, bit the bullet and went for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're fully right in the sense that Amazon has changed drastically since, even I started. I mean, I remember, first product I ever launched on Amazon. I didn't have professional photography or anything. I literally took pictures with just a digital camera I had at the time on a white sheet as a background. So it wasn't like I was doing anything, particularly special, so to speak. Yeah, the way I kind of came about, and like I said, I started in e-commerce doing a resale, and I actually was reselling trading cards like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! So I was a big Yu-Gi-Oh! Kid when I was young and everything, and I'm still in trading cards. I mean, I keep, Magic the Gathering cards on my desk to this day. And so
they're still huge on eBay as well, aren't they? Trading cards are a massive.
Absolutely. And and that was one of the things is that I actually just bought like a bulk thing from a garage sale at one point in time. And then as I was like trying to build out my own decks, right? One of the things you always do is you try and like buy singular cards that you're like wanting to play with. And so I started with that and I ended up selling it. I realized that there's a huge market on eBay for it. And that's how I kind of got into the idea of like what e-commerce is and like doing it and whatnot. And so pivoting that, I ended up doing dropshipping for a while. I think that's a pretty common thing, about a decade ago or so that even this day that people get into where they're like, oh yeah, dropshipping so easy. Even back then, it was not as easy as people still claim it to be to this day, but it's even so much harder now. But the big thing I think was that I kind of had this moment where I didn't like not having like as much control within the entire process. And so I wanted to actually like build something that meant something, and I wanted to build a brand. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to build a brand. And so first, everything that I was doing was actually private label rather than doing, and difference for those that are initiated private label versus white label, right? And I should say I didn't do private label to start. I did white label to start, sorry. But the difference there is private label, you are manufacturing your own goods with your own brand, and you are essentially selling those. White label, which is what I started out with, is basically where you take someone else's unbranded product, slap it into a box that has your brand on it, and then you sell that. And that's why I initially started out with, to have my own first brand, because I wanted to. I started on Shopify with that white label, and at the time didn't know really anything about Amazon, to be honest. And like even back then, Amazon was pretty small comparatively to where it is today. And so, but there was a point in time where I wanted to start kind of getting into different marketplaces, things like that. I actually had gotten a kind of consulting gig at one point in time with a company to help them build out their Shopify at the time. And so I was helping them with building out their Shopify, and I realized that Shopify was like a super small aspect of their entire e-commerce business. And I started talking to them. They were doing Amazon. Amazon was actually their big fish at the time compared to Shopify. And that's what really introduced me to Amazon. I decided, okay, let's give this a shot. And like I said, first thing I ever did was, purchase my own product and then take a picture of it on a little white sheet and go from there.
That's really cool. I mean, when you kind of started selling on Shopify, did you have any experience, or was it just a kind of like, I'm just going to give this a go and see what happens?
No, I didn't. So like I said, my experience was pretty much eBay exclusive at that time. And, like at this time, which was probably 12, 13 years ago, right? eBay was, I would say, much larger, right, than it is nowadays. I think eBay's still around for like collectors and stuff, but like even back then it was still very much like new products you could find, but like still very a collectible type platform. And so I hadn't done Shopify or anything beforehand, and Shopify back then was pretty, not useless, but it was much, I think, less inclusive of how you could kind of build things out like you can nowadays. And so I was just kind of looking at YouTube videos and saw somebody talking about drop shipping, because there's been a million drop shipping gurus over the years. And so that's where I kind of started, and I was just like, yeah, let's give it a shot. I found a supplier for a couple of different products. I think I only had like 2 or 3 products I was offering at the time. Gave me a good foundation though, because it taught me about kind of advertising, marketing, because how to actually market platforms and websites, right? And it brought me into, I think, fully e-commerce, because eBay, I think, is very accessible to anyone, right? You're just some random Joe Blow. I mean, back in the day, it was eBay, right? You had some random product or random item around your house that you wanted to get rid of, right? Yeah. You would look on eBay or Craigslist, right? Nowadays, I think it's more Facebook Marketplace for like the average Joe Blow. But back then, even like the idea of setting up a Shopify store was, I think, still foreign to a lot of people. Nowadays, it's, I think, much more common. So
I'm interested to know, like, how did you make the decision to sell the particular product that you were going to sell?
Honestly, the first thing I ever listed on Shopify was I was drop shipping this like kitchen gadget. If you've ever seen those choppers that like you slam down, it was basically one of those. First thing I ever listed was that. And honestly, I didn't really have like reason for picking it. It was kind of just one of those things where I was just like, I had one at my house. I've used it before. I found it. I could list it online. I think I listed it for like $11 or $13 plus shipping. So people paid shipping. I was paying like $4 or $5 a unit or something like that, and so the shipping just was like in cost that was eaten across the board. And so, it was what it was. I mean, I didn't have like a motive behind it of like, yeah, I need to sell this specific thing. It was just kind of like, I wanted to sell something, right? And it was just accessible. I found it. I didn't see anyone else who was like, posting ads or like doing this as like a major thing. And so that was kind of the first thing that I listed.
How did that go? Was it successful or?
Sort of successful at the time, right? Because getting into this, it's not like I was, uber successful. And it's not like I was looking at this like actual business venture. I was pretty much just at the time like, I need to make money, right? And so that was just my entire motive. And so the idea of making an extra $1,000 in a month, profit was fantastic to me, right? And so I think at the time I think like maxed out with that product specifically at like 2K a month or something. And at the time, I mean, that's huge, right? Like,
Pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Like from, profit standard and everything for someone like who knows nothing. And don't get me wrong, that's not like an overnight thing that happened. I think that was like months and months and months of like trying to push this and whatnot. I just developed better ad strategies, things like that. But, over time, it's not bad, so to speak, right? And it's one of the things that I think a lot of people who are afraid of getting started in e-commerce have this like idea of like the people who want to get started right away have this idea that you're going to overnight be doing $100,000 in sales, right? Mm-hmm. And the people who are afraid of getting started are like have the exact opposite, where they're like, it's going to take me so long to do all this. And I think that both of those like rules of thought or lines of thought are kind of incorrect in the sense that getting started is like 99% of the battle, right?
Totally agree. I think in my experience, I've found that there's two parts to this, right? The first part is the success entrepreneurs, the guys that are like, I made 100K a month by doing this, that, and the other. And you don't see it as much these days, but certainly 5-10 years ago, it was all about drop shipping. I make X amount per month drop shipping. And I think that people go into this with the expectation that it's really easy, and they start selling something. And after 3 months, they're doing like $25 or whatever, and
even
they
in
make it up.
You still see it in this day and age, like the quote unquote like e-commerce and like Amazon gurus who are like, yeah, you can like, oh, look at this, like I have a high ticket item that I'm selling on Amazon, and I made $100,000 this month, and like 9 times out of 10, what they're showing is just they're showing sales, right? They're not showing their they're not showing their actual ROAS or their profit margins, right? And it's actually crazy when you like dig into a lot of these like online e-commerce gurus and everything who are doing this, who are peddling some course, right? Because of the fact that it's like when you actually get down into the nitty gritty of it, you can just like see it's like, oh yeah, I bet anyone with like 2 brain cells can probably sell $100,000 in a month if they're willing to make, a penny per sale.
Yeah, exactly.
And make whatever it is, $100 or whatever it is, right? Like it can be done, because if you're willing to basically just sell things at cost and whatnot just for a big sales number, that's great. But that's not long-term profitable business, right? And that's
what I call vanity metrics. It's easy to go, I make 100 grand, I turn over 100 grand a month on Amazon, but what's the point in that if you're only making £1,000 or 1% or 2%? Yeah, and I think the other kind of issue, if you like, or the other thing that might deter people a little bit from starting up and starting to try and sell stuff on Amazon or eBay or wherever, is you get these like videos that are like how to sell on Amazon, and they always seem like super complex. So it kind of starts off really straightforward, and then you kind of get into things like in-depth PPC analysis and stuff like that, and you kind of think like you almost need to not know that at the start, because too much information at the very beginning is probably going to put you off. You're probably going to get to a point where you're like, I'm never going to learn this. I'm never going to be able to pick this up, because at that moment in time, it feels overwhelming. But I think I encourage people to start with the basics, understand how to make a good listing, get it up and get it running, run a couple of automatic PPC campaigns, analyze it, look into it, start learning a little bit more, start testing manual campaigns yourself, and just slowly start building your knowledge as you're kind of selling. Again, like I think perhaps people overcomplicate it, and then again, that acts as a barrier to entry. So 9 times out of 10, they don't even start.
I'd agree. And it's one of the things, I like my Amazon guy, for instance, we do courses, right? But our courses aren't like the guru courses, like, oh, you're going to make $100,000. It's the basics, right? We want to teach the basics. And like we have put such, and like myself personally have put such a, big emphasis on, I think, just seller education, like e-commerce and Amazon education, because it's one of those things where the barrier to entry isn't nearly as scary as I think people make it out to be and everything. But we also don't want to downplay the fact that, like, yeah, not every brand in the world is going to be $1 million brand, right? Like on Amazon right now, there's only 55,000 individual sellers, not like companies and like organizations, but 55,000 individual sellers. They're doing over $1 million a year, right? Which it's not a big number of like individual people doing that. That being said, there are hundreds of thousands that are doing 250K a year. Right. And so that's the type of thing where it's setting realistic expectations and goals for your brand and, trying to understand that while simultaneously learning the basics and learning about the education that makes it. I mean, the amount of, sellers that have come back to me over the years that I've just, coached, taught, have taken one of our courses or something like that. Right. And are just like, I would never have, taken the jump if I didn't have this information available, right? And I think that's like a really big thing. I mean, even internally, like the employees that we have, right? And like seeing how we'll take somebody from like zero knowledge that we hire as an intern and then like turning them into somebody who is now like basically an expert in the field, right? And they then go off and do their own things and like pivot into these different endeavors and these different things. I mean, like even Horace is like a great example, right? And like I think that's one of the big things that people are so afraid of at the end of the day is like taking that leap of like trying to start to understand. But if you can find the right content, a podcast like this, or you can find a course, or you can find just some form of way of learning about it that is digestible, you can turn into huge endeavors. $1 million brands can be made, $1 million agencies. Like it's a big world, I think, and that's what scares people off from it. But taking it and turning it into like bite-sized pieces to get started is, I think, the biggest aspect of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the main thing that I think people need to understand is it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of learning, and it's not something that you can switch on and leave and just become a millionaire overnight. And I think social media has been guilty of kind of giving that perception in some places. I feel like what that's done is it's encouraged lots of people to start, but when they don't see immediate results, they're going to kind of switch off. And I think, as you mentioned, courses are really important. Education, I'm such a big fan of it. But I think conversations like this are equally as important as how to get started. It's about like setting that expectation out from the start and understanding that you've got a great product, your pricing's really good, you've done that little bit of research, there's definite demand for the product in the region that you're looking to sell. They're the kind of key things that people want to look at. But then it's about understanding that, right, okay, this is a 3 to 5 year project. This isn't a 6-month get rich quick project. And I think if people understand that from the very start and are prepared to go into things with an open mind and learn as they grow and adjust and tweak and have to really kind of pivot and put a lot of effort into it, then I think like anything's possible. The key fundamentals are good product, because if you're selling a rubbish product, it's going to get bad reviews and that's just not going to help. So good product at a good price. And when I say good price, you'll probably be able to give more perspective on this, but in my experience, you don't have to be the cheapest. But if you're not the cheapest, or certainly if you're in the top end of the pricing bracket, you need content that's really going to explain the product and why people are going to pay more for it. That can be a barrier to entry for some people, because they might pick up a product that's really high quality and then go, well, all of these things I'm guessing you've done in the past. And I feel that they're really important elements to kind of getting going on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, price is always going to be the number one most converting factor, right? Like that's just clear as day at the end of the day. If you're selling something that could be worth $100 and you're selling it for $5, yeah, you're going to make a lot of sales, right? But the big thing there is that I think when it comes to price, it comes down to like a value proposition, right? And explaining how your price is justified, whether you have a luxury product, right? Or you have just a standard good. And I think that comes back, I mean, especially when you're like launching a brand and, touching a little bit on what you kind of talked about, like it's going to take a long time. It is. Myself personally, I have typically like 4 brands out historically that I'll talk about, right? That are what I would consider like my success stories, right? And I've had probably 6 that are like could be considered successful, but I have had far more brands that have just blown up and failed, and it's because of that aspect that no, not every single thing that you launch, even if you have a great pricing plan, even if you get into the nitty-gritty with it, is going to work off the bat, right? But you have to be willing to take, my favorite saying in the world is to fail fast and fail often. Try and consistent. If you fail fast and like you fail often, you will learn from those mistakes that you have made prior, from those failures, right? And so looking at that and looking at brands and launching them and like pricing, right? I typically recommend people, if you're going to get into like Amazon, for instance, like the very bare minimum you should be at from like a product perspective in this day and age is like $25. Now, that's to say you can sell products under $25. $25? Absolutely not. You totally can. But the reason I say that is because realistically on Amazon, you have to have like a minimum 60% margin just to sell on the platform. So starting that as like the baseline, right? We get back to that whole thing of like making $100,000 in sales. Well, if you're only making 1% or 0.5% on that, it's like, where's the actual profit at the end of the day, right? So it's one of those that I look at of 25 is like bare minimum, but 25 to 50 is always what I've kind of looked at as like the golden standard for pricing of products on Amazon. You can go up to 75 in this regard as well, but it's because that's about the realm, typically speaking, that people will kind of just snap buy things. How many times have you gone out to lunch, right? And you've just like, had lunch 25 minutes of your day. You're never going to get the meal back. You're never going to be able to use that meal again or anything like that.
No, it's true.
It's just a one-time purchase you're making. It's probably $35-$40. I guess I should say that's pretty expensive lunch. Maybe if you're with like somebody else and you're paying. But like that's the thing. And that's how, same thing with products. If you have a product that somebody will use again and again and again, it's $25. It's pretty easy for someone to make that decision and buy that product. So that's where I kind of look at 25 to 50, maybe 75 being like the golden ratio for pricing and placement.
So in that theory then, you would target more the impulse purchaser on Amazon more than the kind of considered purchase?
Yes, I would. And primarily because Amazon and the way its algorithm works loves volume. Amazon just loves volume at the end of the day. Ranking for keywords, ranking for categories is heavily determined off of volume at the end of the day. Even if you have a product that is leagues and leagues better than somebody else's product, if yours is $100 and theirs is $10, right? They could be selling less sales volume, right? They could be selling 10x less sales volume than you and still be essentially the better seller from a revenue perspective, just because Amazon will rank them higher. They'll have 10,000 sales while you have 1,000 sales per month. And Amazon is going to look at that and be like, they have a lot of sales volume for their product. We're going to rank this product really highly, even if your product is technically from a revenue perspective doing the exact same as theirs. It's one of those things where I always am going to take the volume play on Amazon over the high ticket play. And especially, I mean, if we look at like direct to consumer e-commerce, I might go a little bit more high ticket if that's the case then, just because you have a little bit more versatility. Your ROAS can be a little bit higher from that perspective. But Amazon is just so heavily a volume machine.
That's interesting. So basically an impulse purchase, so between $25 and $40 you're looking at. Does that make it more difficult to get the required margin that you want? Because obviously shipping costs and FBA fees are quite high. Is there any thought process around, okay, I can sell this product for $25, but I need the cost to be X before I can do that, because the percentage of storage and shipping fees is going to be that much higher than it would be for a higher ticket item, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that very heavily will come into play, I think, with category product you're in. So something like a supplement. Supplements, their retail price can be sometimes hundreds of percents over their cost of goods, as they are just so cheap to manufacture, even in the US especially. And so it's one of those things where you'll see a protein powder and that protein powder is going for $30. Their cost of goods is probably $2, right? Like or $3, right? Like they're 1,000% gross margin before any other fees are taken into account. And that's purposeful because of the aspect that you can make that and you can make it up on advertising side. Whereas if you're selling a very technical product, you're selling just like a computer gadget, right? A webcam. How about that? A webcam. You're selling a webcam, and that webcam, you can be selling it for $30. Well, the components of that webcam can maybe cost you $10. It can cost you $15, right? And that's a hard margin to hit comparatively. You can't do as much with that compared to what you can do without it.
A really interesting point, actually, that you bring up something like protein powder, because like a consumer electronic product like a webcam, because I heard a rumor, I don't know how true this is, but it feels like pretty valid. There are something like 10% of the protein brands that are out there. So let's say there's like 100,000 protein brands out there. Less than 10,000 manufacturers of protein powders, probably scaled up slightly. Basically, the tall and the short is that a lot of these products that you're buying from Amazon that probably range from $20 through to sometimes $90 plus are actually exactly the same product. They're just in different packaging. There's no way to tell that, because the packaging can tell you exactly what you want to hear, and it's basically a marketing exercise. Whereas with a product like a webcam, those components, you can actually list the components inside it, like the lens quality and the audio pickup and all of that kind of stuff, that actually then warrants the price of the product.
It's marketing at the end of the day. It's branding and marketing.
Exactly, yeah.
When you look at the car industry, is a great example of this. Lexus is this super luxury brand, everything. 90% of the cars that Lexus makes are just a variation of a Toyota car with a little bit nicer of an interior, but they are double, triple the price of the exact same thing you could get with Toyota. It's because of that branding, that marketing play, right? In the sense that you can get the same product from two different brands, same exact ingredients, same everything. I mean, if you go to most grocery stores nowadays, grocery stores now will have like their own grocery store brand of a product. It's the exact same thing. It is that the actual manufacturer of that product has sold their recipe to allow it to be essentially generic type product, right? And so
Like a value proposition almost. Get it in the UK.
People love a good brand. People love to have a product that they know they can trust, a brand that they can trust, and it's almost like a placebo thing in their mind of like, these are the two same exact things, but this one it costs a little bit more and the brand is really nice, and so it works a little bit better, right? Even though it's literally the same exact product. That's something that I think is frequently becoming, I almost want to say, less of an issue on Amazon, just because the aspect that people have put so much effort into their brands, to where it is almost like a race to the bottom at times, when I kind of talk about the idea of pricing as number one converting factor. Because of that, you can have two people with the same exact product and there's nothing really all that different with the products at the end of the day. But one of them is $5 cheaper, has a really nice brand presence around it. The other one is $5 more expensive, has a really, really nice brand presence. It just comes down to, are you willing to make a little bit extra margin?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, from the consumer perspective, the concept that you're basically paying for packaging is crazy, but part and parcel of the world that we live in. That's just how it is. It's the same as Amazon. Two very similar listings, one with really good content, really good imagery, A+ content, etc., and one with none of that, despite it being the same product with the better images and the better A+ content, etc., is probably going to sell more than the one that hasn't got that. I guess it's a kind of similar concept. That's like really cool, really interesting. So I think I'm really interested to understand from you is, you mentioned before that there were a load of brands that failed and that you didn't do as well on as you'd have hoped to. What do you think is the number one lesson that you learned from those failures?
I mean, the fail fast, fail often. That was probably the number one lesson. I think if I can direct someone who is looking to start their own brand, and I do coaching sessions weekly with people who are trying to do this and work with them to start their own brands. And so the number one thing I tend to rely on for people and try and push people towards in this day and age comes down to, don't just sell a product because you think it's good and just because you think it's going to make you money and whatnot, because you're going to have a really, really hard time actually selling it. And what I typically mean by that is, I like to direct people into the realm of trying to sell products they believe in, trying to sell products they themselves would use, because one of the hardest things I think people have a difficult time with is actually understanding their audience and their customers and what the customer wants. But that becomes so much easier if you yourself are someone who would utilize your product. Is that to say you have to do that for any product that you start or any brand you start? Absolutely not, right? You could sell anything you really want to at the end of the day. But I think it makes it exceptionally easy to feel invested in a product and a brand, exceptionally easy to know how to grow it, know what the difficulties are going to be, because anytime you're starting a brand and trying to sell a product, you're realistically trying to solve a pain point that someone has in their life. Like 9 times out of 10, that is what you're trying to do. Even if it's something as simple as, I have this little desk cleaner, like it has a little brush on it and everything that I can use for my keyboard and all these little gizmos and gadgets on it, right? Super simple product, million different variations of it out there. So it's not something I would encourage someone to get into, but someone who wants to get into desk products, right? Like, is it something that you yourself would utilize on your desk regularly? Are you annoyed by something on your desk. You don't have enough organization in a certain way for this type of desk you have. These are things that make it really easy to come up with a product and understand how to market it, because you yourself are the person you would be marketing to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point and something that I've considered countless times, really, and the arguments or debates that I've had in the past, because again, I'm kind of with you on this. I feel like, particularly about products that you're passionate about, quite a sporty person, I'm really into football or soccer, as you guys would call it. If I could sell a product that was related to the sport that I love and I'm passionate about, then like you say, you're going to know the audience, you're going to be passionate about the product, you're going to totally believe in the product. That's going to give you a massive advantage. There's no way it can't give you a huge advantage. I guess the dangers is that, are you actually looking at the opportunity properly, or are you just getting carried away because you want to be kind of see yourself in that industry and you see yourself selling that product? And I guess that's kind of where you really need to make sure that your research and your product research and competitor research is done really well. You're not cutting corners because you don't want to find out things that might put you off. I totally agree with that. If you can get a product that fits in with your passion, that's going to give you a massive head start straight away.
I'd agree. I mean, look at all the things that I kind of listed today of like, I got started with cards that I was out purchasing, right? The first product I did was one that already was in my kitchen at the time and that I've utilized before. I launched at one point in time this entire like towel line and whatnot. It was like funny sayings that I would just like think of, and that was how I essentially did it. And that was just
that's cool.
Yeah, like print on demand thing that I did at one point. And so that's the big thing. It's stuff where the things that have always worked are things that I myself would do. And so even to this day, I look at like our agency, my Amazon guy, and like look at what we do, right? And to this day, everything we do, we think about the customer. We think about pain point, right? And that's how you have to look at it. Doesn't matter if you're selling a product, brand, a service, anything. You have to look at the pain that people have and talk to that pain and understand every brand, every successful product in the world has done that. And I think people hear the word pain and they think like, oh, it has to be something that like people really hate. And it's like, no, it can be the most monotonous thing in the world, right? Like, it can be something funny too. I mean, I have this little mug on my desk right now that says Liberty, and it's just from a game that I like, right? And it's that kind of thing where that's not necessarily like what you would consider a pain, but it's filling a gap, so to speak, within the market. And so I think that's a big thing that people need to understand when they're looking to start a brand, is talk to that pain, so to speak. Yeah,
100%. And I think one of the first things that I learned, especially once moving into the kind of agency environment and thinking about how do we approach this, how do we market this product? One of the first things I learned was to understand what problem is this product solving? What is the problem that this product's solving? And there was another saying that I really love and I use quite often, and it says sell holes, not drills. So I learned that in the first agency that I worked for. One of the things that I was taught, and it's about selling the actual result of the product rather than what the product is. So if you imagine that from a drill perspective, rather than saying this is a super high powered drill, it comes with 35 pieces, you'd be saying, hey man, look at the hole that this is, this clean, like it's gone through this like butter. And actually you go, well, that's the end result. That's what I wanted to achieve. So I think those two things I've used a lot in the past. What problem is it solving and what benefits does it give me as a consumer? Once you understand that, you're able to produce content that's going to help you to sell that product, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great talking to you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm conscious like we've covered quite a bit. Just as a kind of parting piece of advice for the listeners, if you've got people out there that are thinking about selling a product, or they found something and they want to kind of start to explore the opportunity on Amazon or eBay or any other kind of marketplace, what would you say is the single key most important piece of information, or the first thing that they should look at and learn about before they kind of go on this journey?
Learn the basics of anything you're going into, whether it's Amazon, Shopify, or anything. There is so much information out there at this point in time. There are podcasts like this one that you should listen to and hear about things. Our channel, My Amazon Guy, we post 2,500 videos, right? We've spawned thousands of brands. We've spawned agencies and whatnot that follow the teachings at this point in time. And it's exactly that. It doesn't have to be us, right? It could be anyone, but find a reasonable source of truth that you believe in, that you can easily understand their teachings, learn the basics from them, and just start. There is nothing that will make your life harder when it comes to starting a brand or just getting started than just getting started.
Totally agree. That's a great piece of advice, Noah. Thank you very much. It's been amazing talking to you. And yeah, how do people get hold of you if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check us out, myamazonguy.com. Again, we have a YouTube channel, My Amazon